Boker Tov, everybody, or if you're in the Atlantic coast, and it's Ram Tovim. It's not exactly almost Shabbos, but getting close to Shabbos here in Prague, which is where I am. So I know last week I said I would talk about the Ramban, and then we got sidetracked into all kinds of other things. Said I'd come back to it, but since we're in Prague, I decided we'll have to wait. We'll wait for another time, and I figured we'll talk very briefly about some of the rabbis who've been in Prague over the years. This is on the Altneuschul. And I just do want to say, I don't know if Morris is online, Morris Sassos, who often comes online. Today's the Yortzeit of his father, and he's dedicating the day of learning in memory of his father, Avraham ben Yehuda Noach. As Albert Sosthemus, so Morris and Doreen Sosthemus want to thank him, and then the Shema should have an Aliyah, and we should have long life. And I do see you, Morris. Okay, very, very nice. How are things in Toronto? I hear I missed the flood this week. Okay, so the first thing let's discuss. Okay, the Altneuschul is the most I would say the most important shul in the world, but it's the most it's the shul has the greatest amount of rabbinic leaderships that happened in that shul. There's no other shul that has had a roster of great rabbinic figures as the Altneuschul in Prague. As we'll see, we'll go through it. Just it's I believe it's the oldest shul in the world in continuous use. There are, they discover some shul in the 6th century in Israel, but they haven't used it in 1,500 years. So the Altneuschul has been in use ever since it was built in the 14th century. And the Maharal is the most famous, but we'll discuss other people. I'm not going to start now there, but let's start. Of course, why is it called the Altneuschul? So who wants to tell me what's called the Altneuschul? Okay, so Prague is Ir Ve'em Yisrael. Prague is an amazing center of Jewish life, not anymore, but there was through much of our history. So they had the old shul that they built before the Altneuschul, and then they built the Altneuschul, and they called it the new shul, the Neuschul. I don't, my pronunciation isn't good. Please forgive me. So you have the old shul and the new shul. That's it. So and then what happened? They built a newer shul. So the newer shul became the new shul, but this couldn't be the old shul because they had the old shul already. So this had to become the Altneuschul. This is the Altneuschul. It's the middle shul, and that's probably the origin of its name, the Altneuschul. It's nowhere near as fancy and ornate as some of the other amazing shuls that we saw here in Prague, in Budapest, that are just like you walk in, it blows you away. This is a much more simple shul, I guess, and it was built, of course, I don't know, of course, but it was built without a women's section because in the 14th century, women weren't coming to shul. Why do you need a shul why do you need a women's section? I've often mentioned what Mark Shapiro, who's leading our trip, says when the first time he was in Tunisia. So apparently there are 12 shuls there, and he went into shul and there was no women's section. So we went over to the rabbi. He said, "Where do the women daven?" And the rabbi looked at him like with a straight face, and he said, "Ma inyan nashim eitzel beit knesset." What in the world do women have to do with a shul? And this is in the 21st century. So they did add on some, as they modernized, they added on some windows in the back and sort of have a room so women can sort of peek in through some of the windows and daven. We will see, please go out tonight, that's where they say one of the strange minhagim, and then we'll get into the rabbis, is they say Mizmor Shir Chanukat Habayit, Mizmor Shaliyom Hashabbat, they'll say it twice, once from the bima, once from the amud up front. Why that is, we'll have to leave for another time. Danny Sperber has a whole article about this. He gives 5 different reasons. And of course, rule whenever there are 5 reasons for something, that means we have no idea what the reason is, which is why we have to give 5 different reasons, because this one, this reason, this one, that reason, etc., etc. So I want to start with the comment of Elazar Flecklis. I imagine many people have not heard of him. If you have, let me know. Elazar Flecklis was a student and successor of the Noda B'Yehuda, Rav Yecheskel Landos, whose grave we just saw a few hours ago, this morning, in the cemetery in Prague. And he has a comment that I like very much, that on Shiviti Hashem L'Negdi Tamid. He wrote the response to Tshuva Me'ava, the Tshuvat of Love. It's a beautiful name for a book of responsa, the Tshuvat Me'ava. And he writes in his introduction that Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid, right? That adorns many of our shuls. You'll see in Europe, shuls are adorned a little bit differently than in America. Often they have letters, Rosh Teva, different psukim, all kinds of different things. So, but very common in our shuls to have Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid. God is before me always. So the word neged, means opposed to. It means alongside and opposed, like your wife is an Ezer Kenegdo. God created a wife to be an Ezer Kenegdo. So we normally translate to be like a helpmate, to be a side, but in the Sieve rates, neged means to be opposed to. That the proper role of a spouse is to be a constructive critic. You don't want to, just like in the lahavdil, I guess, in a business, you want people who think differently. Want people who are going to question. In politics, you need a strong opposition to question and to argue and debate. So too, you need a spouse who's not just going to accept everything you do. Who's going to have a little bit of critical approach. Ezer Kenegdo. It means, and of course, it's very beautiful. You're alongside somebody by being against them. So he interprets Shivita Shem Negdi Tamid as the word neged, to have this opposition notion that we normally say we should place God before us always. He said we should place God in opposition to us always. In other words, we should always be nervous that whatever we're doing is sort of in opposition to what God wants. Sort of a Jew should always be on its own. It has, I think, the same ultimate meaning in many ways, but I think it's a very interesting explanation that I first saw quoted in the Sefer, Nishmat Abraham. That's the Sefer of Abraham, who's one of the medical experts, leading experts in medicine. I believe he's still living. I hope he's still living in Israel, Dr. Abraham. And anyways, he quotes that at the beginning, that we should always fear that we're not necessarily carrying out the will of God. Shivita Hashem lenagdi tamid. Okay, so I'll just list off a few of the rabbis who served here. Some is the chief rabbi of Prague, and meaning they done in the Altneuschul, and some either as a Beit Din, and then we'll try to discuss a few of them very briefly, just to give Rosh Prakim some highlights of their life. So the most famous one is the Maharal. The Maharal is 1525 to 1609. I believe those are his years. But around that time, so you have Rav Yom Tov Lipman Heller. That's who wrote the commentary on the Mishnah, the Tosfot Yontiv. The Levush, Rav Mordechai Yafi, who wrote the competing work on the Shulchan Aruch. You have the Kli Yakar, who used to be in the Mikra, Rav Ephraim Lunshitz, who used to be in the Mikra Gedolot of each one of before the Mosad HaRav Kook put on Mikra Gedolot. He used to be in the Mikra Gedolot. Of course, the Noah Yehuda in more modern times. It's really Rav Yonatan Eibschitz spent time here. Of course, the Emden Eibschitz controversy, although it broke out in Altona, but he was the rabbi here served in the Beit Din here for many years. And really, Prague always attracted great rabbis. And they always wanted great rabbis. So it was a wonderful city to come to. And that's why, like I say, the shul is the most sort of, in that way, the most impressive shul in the world in terms of who served. So let's discuss very briefly some of the people, who they were, what they did. If I mention the Maharal, here's the most famous. I'll see tonight, I have to read it, reread. There are series of takanot. The Maharal went. Shuls in the Middle Ages weren't like nowadays. Today, you want to make a shul, you make a shul. In the Middle Ages, you couldn't just make a shul. The community had to approve of a shul. As a matter of fact, Rav Yaakov Emden, the Emden Eibschitz controversy, Rav Yaakov Emden needed special permission. They were happy to give it to him, special permission that he could create his own shul. He refused to daven in the same shul that Rav Yonatan Eibschitz was the rabbi on. They lived like 2 blocks apart from each other, and they were not friends. Let's put it mildly. And he wanted his own minyan, so they gave him permission that he could have a minyan as of exactly 10 men. You can't have 12 men, and you can't just start up your own shul. Communities at much greater strength. The truth of the matter is, Rav Moshe Feinstein has a series of tshuvot. People read it today, and nobody reads it today because they laugh at it, and nobody follows this. Rav Moshe Feinstein says you're not allowed to open up a shtibel. What right do you have to open up a shul somewhere? There has to be a community shul. He discusses it along the lines. A lot of his reasons is hasakat gvul. In other words, the rabbi has to make a living, and if there are 15 shuls, everybody davens on the shul around the corner because they don't want to walk 10 minutes to shul. So they make their own minyan, and then they don't become members, and then they can't afford it, and it creates community discord, all the things that we have in our community that we totally ignore. But this is Rav Moshe Feinstein writing in the 20th century. He's saying this European model that the community ran the shul, and that was it. When the shul ran out of space, you built new shuls, but you didn't. You weren't allowed to. You had an institution of private shuls. We have here in Prague. Also, that's a sort of where people with their own money built their own shuls. You also realized communities taxed their people. In many countries, ad Yom Hazeh, till today in Europe, you can say I'm Jewish and I want whatever. I think in Germany it's 9%. I believe here in Czech Republic it's 4%. You check what religion you are, and then 4% of your taxes, 4% goes to pay to all the communal services. Generally in Europe, governments pay for day schools, for shuls, not 100. So unlike they don't have this American model of separation of church and state, the constitutional prohibition to subsidize religion that doesn't exist in Europe. So it's sometimes it's free to go to these Jewish schools, and the government gives money to refurbish shuls, etc., etc. Okay, that's as a general. So the Maharal made a series of takanot. And when the rabbi made takanot, it's not like today. So you make it, you go to the other minyan, you do whatever you want. So my favorite one, if I can say that, I have to reread them. I don't remember them all. But when I go to shul tonight, I'll reread it. Is that people who are single get two aliyahs in their life. You're not allowed to have an aliyah unless you're married. And obviously, the idea of woman aliyot that's wasn't bad b'cheshbon, but you're only allowed to have an aliyah on your bar mitzvah and your ofruf. They didn't give aliyahs on simple story. It's an amazing thing that you have a aliyah in your bar mitzvah, and then your aliyah in your ofruf and zehu, and then when you get married, we'll start giving you aliyot. So that's just an interesting takana that they had here in the shul. Okay, but what do you know about the Maharal? What is when you think of the Maharal? What do you think of? The Maharal of Prague. What's the most famous thing of the Maharal of Prague?
The golem.
I was afraid people were going to say that. Okay, the golem. So without getting the golem is all over here in Prague. You go in, it's good commercialism. The golem, and they have a room here in the shul where the golem presumably is. I don't want to get into it, but all I do is I want to recommend you read Schneerleiman's article. I'm too much of a rationalist, so you're talking to the wrong guy. Maybe other people would speak differently on the golem, but I'm coming from the rationalist school of the Rambam. So I take Schneerleiman, who wrote an article that basically showing that the golem is an invention of Yudel Rosenberg. Those who live in Toronto, Yudel Rosenberg served as the rabbi of the Bet Jacob congregation where I served as the rabbi 90 years after he did. And then he moved to Montreal. He translated the Zohar into Hebrew. He was the first one to translate Zohar. And he's a major Talmud Chacham. And then he started the Eitz Chaim school, what later on became Eitz Chaim here in Charlotte. He was here like 1915 or so. And then he moved to Montreal. And he wrote children's stories, bedtime stories, part of his talents. So I understand he wrote it not to make up a story. So it's for fun. He made up a story. The Maharal had a golem, all these cute stories, and he saved the Jewish community and etc. That's one of the reasons they give, or why we say Mizmor Shir twice here, because once the golem had to protect the Jews, and they had already said Mizmor Shir, which means they had accepted Shabbos already, and the golem he had to violate the laws of Shabbos, so they didn't want him violating Shabbos. So when he came back, they said Mizmor Shir again to pretend the first one didn't count. He did it before it was Shabbos, like in the summer. Now we're going to do it again when it's really Shabbos. No. But anyway, so that was invented. It's basically bedtime stories. As Schneerleiman ends his article, Yehuda Rosenberg's grandson was Mordechai Richler. I presume most people have heard of Mordechai Richler. It's a famous Canadian author. I don't know if everybody's heard of him, but not religious at all. And as Schneerleiman ends his article, that Mordechai Richler was not the first one in his family to write fiction. Okay, so now that we've disposed of the Maharal and the golem, what's the important parts of them? Even if there was a golem, okay, fine, there was a golem. What's the important part of the Maharal? Why is the Maharal important in Jewish history? I mean, this is an unfair question. We need like a horror. I'm no expert on the Maharal at all. But I'm just, you need people experts who can spend years on the Maharal. And I have his whole Kitvei Maharal. I just haven't read it yet. but it's not. I'm not attracted to his sort of style. But anybody know what the Maharal is, I guess, famous for? If I don't know if so first of all, he wrote a commentary on Rashi, the Gur Aryeh. That is one of the classical commentaries on Rashi. I'll just give you one idea that I love from his commentary on Rashi. It says in the Torah, in Parshat Mishpatim, im kesef talveh et ami et anima. This is lo tikach lo neshach. I don't remember the exact wording. If you lend money to your neighbor, the poor person, do not take any interest. It's a prohibition of taking interest, chapter 22, I believe, in Exodus. If you lend money, you're not allowed to take interest. So Rashi makes a comment. Rashi says this is one of the three places in the Torah where if doesn't mean if means when. And what do you mean if you lend money? You're obligated if you can afford it. That might be if you can afford it. What do you mean if I lend money, don't charge interest? When you have money, the highest mitzvah of tzedakah, besides giving a job, is to lend money, not to give money. So the im doesn't mean if. Im means when. So the question, of course, that the Maharal asked, the obvious question, if the Torah means if, why doesn't it say, I mean, the Torah means when, it should say when. It could have said ki, what says, ki talveh, when you lend money. What do you mean if you lend money? Why did the Torah say if? So the Maharal explains very beautifully, is the Torah doesn't want you to give charity because you have to. And that's just something developed really earlier by the Rambam, where the Rambam distinguishes between what we might call ritual and ethical mitzvot. When it comes to ritual mitzvot, the reason I do this is because God said so. I'm supposed to want to eat a cheeseburger. I fail at that, unfortunately. According to the Rambam, you should desire to eat a cheeseburger because there's nothing morally wrong with eating a cheeseburger. Had the Torah not told us to eat one, we would eat with them. We only do it because God said so. But when it comes to ethics, what to me? I don't talk lashon hara. I don't gossip. I don't steal from you because it says so in the Torah. No, I don't steal from you because I'm a moral person. I'm an ethical person. Forget what it says in the Torah. So therefore, we should. The Torah doesn't want us to command us to give tzedakah because the Torah writes it. If you give, you should do it as a volunteer. Of course, Rashi's telling you, yeah, even if you don't want to do it, you have to do it. But the ideal is to want to do the mitzvah, not to have to do the mitzvah. Okay, that's just one comment he has on his commentary, Gur Aryeh. Maharal, I think, is more famous for his sort of, I don't know, I wouldn't call it philosophical works, but his writings. He was a big influence on Chassidut. He is a very Kabbalistically oriented, and since I don't know enough about the Maharal, he's somebody who took the Agadot, the non-legal sections of the Gemara, as binding and at face value. Often you have to reinterpret them, but many people before them took them sort of, they weren't really binding. They were just views of certain sages that, in the other views, etc. The Maharal takes them much more seriously. The other thing I'll quote about the Maharal is his educational philosophy, which unfortunately has not been accepted. It's not his educational philosophy, it's the educational philosophy of our sages. But unfortunately, we don't always listen to what our sages say. So our sages in Pirkei Avot tell you a schedule. You're supposed to learn Mikrat, Tanakh at the age of 5. And so the Mishnah. Mishnah doesn't mean like the 6 orders of the Mishnah because it didn't really exist then. But it means straight, this is what you do, this is what you don't do. You have to, this is kosher, this is not kosher, these are the 39 prohibited activities on Shabbat. No analysis. But what today is the Mishnah. Just a straight law without explanation. That you do for 5 years, and only at 15 they begin analysis. The backwards and forwards of the Gemara, and the big, comparing and analyzing, because your mind is not developed. First of all, you need background knowledge, and secondly, you need a developed mind. You don't do calculus in grade 4. You need to start mathematics. You have to build on it. So the Gemara is the last building block, and you started too early, it messes up the whole system, which we see all the time. Many people hate the study of Gemara. But if they only started at 15 when they knew Tanakh and they knew the Mishnah, first of all, Gemara would be way easier. In 1 week, they'd catch up to everybody, and it would just flow so much more easily. So he lamented the fact that the Jewish people have gone away from this practice of what Mishnah said. I really have to check this out now. I don't know. The Maharal lived around the same time of the Ramah. Another great city in Jewish history is Krakow. And there are a lot of there are rabbis who were in Prague and Krakow. The Ramah, Ramosha Isserlis, is the final arbiter sort of Ashkenazic practice in the Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah lives from 1532 or 1520, so somewhere around there to 1572. That this is the time that Pilpul is beginning. That's Rav Shlomo Shachna, Rav Yaakov Pollack. These are the founders of Polish Jewry, and they introduced a system of Pilpul. This is not our topic, but analysis, analysis, and there was a lot of criticism of that. I'm not sure, I really don't know if the Maharal is responding to any of that, but the Maharal preached that we should go back to the rabbinic notion of how the rabbi said it, and he was very upset that we put Tosfot on the side of the page. You have to remember, the first Maharal was born around 1525. The first Talmud, the first complete edition of Talmud, is printed in 1523. And one of the big opponents of the printing press, or the fear of the printing press, was the Maharal's, his brother, Rabbi Betzalel, I believe. His brother, think of the internet. Remember how all the rabbis, I mean, even today you have it a little less so, but the rabbis were yelling and screaming how terrible the internet is. I mean, and it's awful. And there was great opposition, as hard as it is to believe, is the printing press. The Tiferet Yisrael, who, as far as I know, was not in Prague, who's another commentator on the Mishnah, writes that Gutenberg, the inventor of the printing press, is one of the Chasidei Umat Olam, one of the righteous of the world, because him and Jenner, who created the vaccine, the smallpox vaccine, and Reuchlin, who saved the Talmud from being burned by the Catholics, and Drake, had something to do with famine. He quotes those four people as the righteous of the world. I've often commented, it's very fascinating. I have no idea what Gutenberg did in his private life. Maybe I don't know. I'm going to say, God forbid, maybe he was an adulterer. Who knows? I don't know. But the Tiferet Yisrael says he's one of the righteous of the world because he created this tremendous thing. The printing press was so amazing for human development. But there was a lot of opposition to it from the Maharal's brother, and there was other people. Part of it was fear. You don't need a rabbi anymore, which is true. One of the fears of the internet. You just go online and do ask the rabbi, which is not a good idea. I agree. And people would just look books. He was also afraid. Remember, in the Middle Ages, the Sephardic world was much bigger than the Ashkenazic world, and he was afraid the Sephardic world would overwhelm. People would read what the Sephardim do. How come we can't eat kitniyot? Or I don't know, whatever. So there was, anyways, that was sort of the time period of the Maharal, the beginning of the printing press. So he was upset. He lamented the fact that they print the Tosfot on the side of the Gemara, because Tosfot's dialectic and complex, and when they print that, so that's what people learn. Who learns the Rosh? Rosh is much easier, or the Rif, because it's in the back of the Gemara. So it's much easier just to learn what's on the side of the Gemara. Okay, but I think his greater fame is really his thought process. He's not considered, when we think of the Maharal, we don't think of a great Talmudic scholar. Of course, he was a great, everything is relative, but compared to the Rashba, the Ritva, and the Rambam, we don't put him in that league in Talmud. But in Jewish thought, he's really one of the great thinkers and one of the most influential thinkers. Okay, enough of the Maharal. Let's talk a little bit on the. Okay, I'll just mention what I said before, Rav Mordechai Yappi. Since Rav Mordechai Yappi, who's also sort of an unknown figure, I think the Mishnah Berurah, the famous place I remember the Mishnah Berurah quoting him is on Hanukkah. Why Hanukkah we don't have a Sudat mitzvah? Why there's no mitzvah to eat on Hanukkah, only on Purim? So I think he quotes the Levush, because Hanukkah was a spiritual miracle, so we celebrate with spiritual things, learning Torah, lighting candles. Purim was a physical threat to the Jews, so we celebrate by eating. So I think I believe that was the Levush who expressed that explanation. I believe the Mishnah Berurah quotes at the beginning of Hilchot Hanukkah. The Levush Mordechai Yappi, I believe he wrote 10 levushim, 10 garments that we have to wear that to cover Jewish law, right? The Rambam codifies Jewish law in 14 chapters. Yad Chazaka, the strong hand. Why 14? I don't know exactly. I have to look. I know the reason, but I'm not on top of that. Why Dafka 14? The Rambam likes the number 13. 13 principles of faith to correspond to the 13 attributes of God. But he codified Jewish law in 14 books. The Torah codified Jewish law in 4 books, and the Shulchan Aruch just followed the style of the Torah. So he also did the Jewish law in 4 books. The Levush did it in 10 books, but nobody is, myself included. I don't think I've ever opened. I don't even know if it's in print, if you can buy it. I assume it's on HebrewBook.org or somewhere. I don't know. I never checked. But the Levush is at the same time of the Shulchan Aruch, and he was the competing work to he was the competition, and the Shulchan Aruch won. Like Lahavdil, what was it? VHS Bet? I don't know when they came out with the video. There were 2 competing companies, and one just won. The other one nobody heard of. I forget now what they are. Somebody remind me. And that's it. That's it. You win. I don't know. Android and Apple. Apple destroyed. I mean, BlackBerry and Apple. Like I used to own a BlackBerry. And, BlackBerry was the richest, the number 1 company in Canada. I made the dumb mistake of investing and buying shares in Apple and in BlackBerry and not in Apple. And I paid the price. So had I invested that same amount that I put in BlackBerry into Apple, I don't want to tell you how much money I would have, but I would have a lot more money. I mean, not I have a lot more money. But BlackBerry is now, BlackBerry used to be Research in Motion. That was great. So so that's basically what happened. The Shulchan Aruch won out. Why did the Shulchan Aruch win out? So that's like any book. Why does any book win out? So that you have to study and scholarship, and every book has its own history. But generally it wins out because it's popular and people like it. It's easy to read, right? The Beit Yosef himself recognized that. Had the Beit Yosef, had Rav Yosef Karo not written a Shulchan Aruch, nobody would have heard of the Beit Yosef. I mean, a few people, nobody would learn the Beit Yosef. It's massive. It's impossible for a normal person to learn. So he himself recognized that. So he wrote a very short book. Oh, that's great. Everything I need to know, the Shulchan Aruch. That's great. But really what happened is because the Ramah, when people start writing commentaries on your book, then you've kind of made it. When nobody, if everybody ignores your book, so that's what happened. It was easy. People wrote commentaries, and so eventually the Shulchan Aruch became the accepted code of law. It didn't have to be, and sometimes things change. The Kitzer Shulchan Aruch used to be very popular. That was a summary Shulchan Aruch, and that's from Hungary, from where we were last week, Rav Shlomo Ganzfried. But anyways, so the Levush was sort of the loser in the, if I can use that word, I don't mean that chas v'shalom and like the way it sounded, but in the battle for which halakhic work would become important. And I don't know. My assumption is that Rav Yosef Karo had no expectation that his book would be studied as the key book of Jewish law 450 years after he wrote it. It's a little bit strange, like that there hasn't been. I spoke about it, briefly last week, how the Aruch HaShulchan is the only code kind of written in the last 500 years, comprehensive code. Jewish law. Yechiel Michal Epstein of the 19th century wrote sort of an update, if you want to call it that, of the Shulchan Aruch, called the Aruch HaShulchan. The Mishnah Berurah is not a standalone book. The Mishnah Berurah is a commentary on just one part of the Shulchan Aruch. It's very sort of strange that there hasn't been, a new book. And how do I know the Shulchan Aruch didn't mean his book for all time? Because he didn't write about things that weren't applicable in his time. He didn't write about Israel and Truma. A lot of the laws he didn't write about because there's no practicality. Only the Rambam. The Rambam had this grand vision, and he was writing the Mishnah Torah. That's what some claim to be the constitution of a Jewish state. This would be for all time, but only the Rambam had that in mind. So only the Rambam writes about things that don't apply. But the Torah, the Rif, the Shulchan Aruch, they just wrote it. They were practical guidebooks. And I'm guessing, I don't know, that they assumed 100 years later, nobody would really read their books. They'd have a new guidebook in their time. But whatever, that's not what happened. And the Shulchan Aruch kept getting added to, the Ramah, and then the Shach, and the Taz, and the Beit Shmuel, and on and on and on and on it goes. And that's become accepted. Now it's very hard. It's hard to imagine somebody writing a book. It's basically impossible to imagine somebody writing a book that would replace the Shulchan Aruch, although in a certain way, we've all done that. Most people today, when they learn Jewish law, and at least in America, so they read all the Art Scroll books, that they put out, and that was really started, that trend, I believe, by the Shmirat Shabbat Kilchata. The Shmirat Shabbat Kilchata was really the first book printed in the 1960s, that sort of took a topic, modernized it, and put a whole book of halakha. So very few people, I think, today will study Hilchot Shabbos from a Shulchan Aruch. They'll use even Shmirat Shabbat Hilchotah is not so popular anymore.
Excuse me. Also the Pesach book.
What? Sorry.
Also the Pesach book.
What about the Pesach books?
There were. I don't remember his name, but there was a guy who wrote all the books.
Blumenkrantz, I think, right? I think, yeah, they have the. I mean, Shimon Eider used to be when I was younger. Now nobody reads Shimon Eider actually. Yeah, books come and go. It's very hard for books to have staying power. It is pretty amazing. These rabbis who I'm quoting all have staying power. The Maharal and the Levush less so, but Yom Tov Lepton Heller will get the neck. They do have staying power. But right, so you have this new gray book that I haven't really gone through, the 4 volumes in Hilchot Shabbos in English. Of course, in Israel, you have Elazar Melamed. Plinei Halakha, that's I think sold 1 million copies. That's become the new halakha work. So in many ways, we have replaced the Shulchan Aruch, but that's only practically. The rabbis who write these books are all basing themselves on the Shulchan Aruch. They're just applying it. In other words, I guess that's the way I understand it. In other words, they're not really writing new. They're very rarely going to go against the Shulchan Aruch. They're going to make the Shulchan Aruch understandable, and they're going to talk about all the new things that are not in the Shulchan Aruch, electricity and all this stuff that the Shulchan Aruch didn't talk about. Anyways, that is the Levush who served here in Prague. Let's talk very briefly on Rav Yom Tov Lifman Heller. What do you know about Rav Yom Tov Lifman Heller? Anybody? The Tosfot Yom Tov. So Tosfot Yom Tov was one of the few rabbis to write an autobiography. I think I don't know if it's not exactly an autobiography. What's it called? Mincha. He was falsely accused and ended up in jail. He had a lot of enemies. He had a lot of that in Jewish history. We were just actually on the Charles Bridge yesterday in Prague. So those of you who have been here know there's a picture of Jesus on a cross being nailed to a cross that has the pasuk Kadosh 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 Hashem Tzvakot written in Hebrew on the cross here in the Charles Bridge that millions of people pass every year. And basically what that is one Jew was basically the story behind it is one Jew was Moser on another one, a business guy. As Mark Shapiro said, these are Shomer Shabbos Jews. Shomer Shabbos Jews. One guy wanted to get rid of his competition, so he said that the other Jew was blasphemizing, and they hung him up, and whatever. And then they made sort of more of the Jews, whatever, except Jesus and with Hebrew verses. So this, unfortunately, was a common occurrence. The Lubavitcher Rabbi getting out of jail. Yeah, but very often Jews would snitch on other Jews, very, very tragically, and that happened to the Tosfot Yom Tov too, and he wrote a whole story about it. I believe it was the Tosfot Yom Tov who composed the Misha Berach that I wish they would say in more shuls instead of the Misha Berach between Aliyahs that I wish they would say in no shuls, and that's the Misha Berach for people who don't talk in shul. I've seen it printed here and there. It is printed in some Sidurim. I don't think it's printed in Koran or Art Scroll or the RCA Siddur. I could be wrong. Somebody wants to double check. I don't know if all my books would be, of course, here. But he composed, I believe it was him, a Misha Berach for people who don't talk in shul. The rabbis used to compose, they used to add stuff to the Siddur. Our Siddur always has new stuff added. Maybe less so, maybe not. But of course, what the Tosfot Yom Tov is most famous for, and that's where he gets his name from, is from his commentary on the Mishnah. It's not so much studied today anymore. I mean, the Kati put a lot of people out of business, so to speak. Pinchas Kati, the classic commentary on the Mishnah is Rav Avadia Bartanura, and he lived a little bit earlier, maybe 50, 60 years earlier. I don't think much earlier. And the Tosfot Yom Tov, you get the classic Mishnah called the Yachin Boaz Mishnah. They have on one side, like you have Rashi and Tosfot on the side of the page. So you have the Bartanura and the Tosfot Yom Tov and the Tiferet Yisrael. That's Rav Yisrael Lifshitz, who I just quoted, who said Gutenberg was one of the righteous of the world. He's on the bottom of the page. And then you have a few little things on the side of the page. But he's most famous for his commentary on the Gemara, on the Mishnah, which is, okay, it's a little bit more complex. The Bartanura is, I think, a little bit easier to understand. Okay, let's move on because I want to discuss some of the other people in it. It's getting a little late-ish. Okay. The Kli Yakar. Who is the Kli Yakar? Anybody ever learned the the Kli Yakar? Anybody ever hear anything? Anybody heard of the Kli Yakar? Oh, good. Larry, what do you know about him?
Just that he was one of the Meforshim. I mean, I've heard the name mentioned. That's all.
Right, Rabbi Ephraim Lunschitz. And he served. These are all pretty much in the 16th century. All the rabbis I'm quoting now, he, like I mentioned, his commentary used to be if you take a classical Mikra Gedolot, so you have Rashi, Ibn Ezra, the Ramban, Sforno, Rashbam. Again, the print that the Mara complained Tosfot was on the side of the page, but by putting Tosfot on the side of the page, Tosfot became much more learned. The printer has tremendous influence. It's why in the we'll discuss about the Leipzig controversy, but print. So what printers do is very important, and what they print and what they don't print. So the Kli Yakar made it into Mikrot Gedolot. Exactly who decided? I think the first Mikrot Gedolot, and I'm pretty sure there is scholarship. I didn't have a chance to look this up before. I think that was also done by the Bombergs, but I'm not sure. That Daniel Bomberg was the non-Jewish printer, publisher of the first Talmud. He worked with rabbis, even though it sounds like a Jewish name. Yeah. Debbie, yeah? I don't hear you.
I'm sorry. I just had technical difficulty. Oh, 1 minute.
No,
hello, do you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I just had technical difficulty. I'm in my car. The Kli Yakar is my favorite
commentary. How come? I can probably guess why. Because your sound isn't great, so I'm going to guess for you, and you can put in the chat, Doctor, when you finish driving, not while you're driving, and tell me. The Kli Yakar is basically a sermon author. He didn't write a classical commentary in the style of Rashi. He gives sermons. He was a preacher, and he was very much preached against the materialism, the emphasis on money that a lot of Jews they have, like in Dvarim, the opening pasuk. He was very much against ostentatiousness, and it creates anti-Semitism. And why do Jews have to show off their wealth? And whatever. That was a key theme of his. But I'm assuming when the Mossad HaRav Kook edition, that's the blue edition, which I guess today is much more popular because it's in block letters. The classical Mikrot Gedolot were always written in Rashi letters, right? Of course, everybody knows Rashi didn't know how to read Rashi letters, right? Rashi letters were invented by the printer. Why? Because when they started printing books, printing wasn't like today. So it was hard to distinguish things on the page. So in order to distinguish the commentary from the actual text, they wanted to make what we call a new font, a different font. And because Rashi was the text that was the commentary that was printed with every chumash, he was the most important commentary. So they called this font Rashi font. So they called it Rashi letters. So if Rashi, it wouldn't take him long, but it's like an amazing thing. If Rashi were to come alive, Rashi couldn't read Rashi letters. Now, it's crazy, maybe that's a harsh word, but in certain circles, God forbid that you should print Rashi in block letters. In other words, it's been sanctified. Even the whole Surat Hadaf of the Gemara, it's read all of Daf Yomi. You understand, all of Daf Yomi is because of a non-Jew, right? The fact that there are 27, like the fact that Daniel Bomberg printed the book, that's what created Daf Yomi. There's been very little changes, minute changes from Daniel Bomberg in 1523 to the Vilna Shas, which is the one we all use today, printed in the 1880s. The standard edition, the newer editions all are just work off of the Vilna Shas printed in the 1880s. But there are very few differences. And Daf Yomi, that's probably why Daf Yomi happened in 1923. You had a standardized text. Before the Vilna Shas, the texts were not exactly the same what's on what page. So the printing of the Vilna Shas in 1880, again, the influence of the printing press, allowed Daf Yomi 40 years later to become a thing, because now everybody had a standardized text, which they didn't often have. But anyways, but the Kli Yakar was removed. The Mossad HaRav Kook edition of Mikra removed the Kli Yakar and removed the Orach Chaim. Orach Chaim, maybe I'm saying just my personal preferences. The Orach Chaim, I understand because I never read the Orach Chaim. I did because he's too hard to understand. He's very Kabbalistic. He's very the Kli Yakar is very Mussardik. So I'm assuming when Moshe Rav Kook and then Moshe Rav Kook added in Kuni, Radak, they added in some people who were more classical commentaries explaining the of the text. So I don't know today. Do they print any Mikra Kedolot with Kli Yakar? Maybe some of the other versions do. But it is interesting. But anyways, he was rabbi here in Prague, a great preacher, and like I say, and his commentary on the Chumash is a lot of the sermons, more or less, that he preached, just like the commentary of the Netziv in the 19th century, or his drashot, what he gave in Volozhin Yeshiva. He used to speak on the Parsha. But my understanding is he gave every morning after davening. He gave a short Parsha shir, the Netziv, the great Rosh Yeshiva in Volozhin, and that was later put together at the Emek Davar. Anyways, that's the Kli Yakar Rav Ephraim Lunshitz. Okay, let's talk about Rav Yonatan Eifshitz. Okay, I'm assuming most people here have heard of Rav Yonatan Eifshitz. I never know. It's always these are hard things to know. Okay, who was Rav Yonatan Eifshitz? When did he? So now we're moving a little bit ahead in history. Rav Yonatan Eifshitz dies in 1764. He's born in the late 1600s. I believe he died in 1764. Because I mentioned Rav Yaakov Emden, who we'll talk about in a second. His opponent died, I mentioned, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, he died in 1776. Always easy to remember that Rav Yaakov, at least if you're born in America, that Rav Yaakov Emden dies in 1776. But Rav Yonatan Eifshitz dies earlier. That's an important thing in that history. So who was Rav Yonatan Eifshitz? What do you know about him? Somebody.
He was a supposed heretic.
I'm sorry?
A supposed heretic.
Yeah, so he's more famous for being the rabbi in Altona, Hamburg, Altona, Wiesenbach, I forget how to pronounce the third name, these three communities next to each other. He was also rabbi in Nikolsburg. We were in Nikolsburg on Wednesday, I think. Nikolsburg is where another great city. It's really where Shimshon Raphael Hirsch served as the rabbi. Before he went to Frankfurt, he was rabbi in Nikolsburg. Nikolsburg was a much bigger community than Frankfurt. Like we think of today, who heard of Nikolsburg? Frankfurt, a big city. When Shimshon Raphael Hirsch was rabbi in Nikolsburg, they had, 300 families. That's a huge community. It's a huge community in the shul. It's a little picturesque town. Like I don't know, we were talking, my wife said, well, I should love to live in a place like this. It's just so beautiful, overlooking the mountains, little roadways, narrow, no, it's just beautiful. Stone thing. And Rabbi Hirsch gets out of his house in the morning, just looks out, Maravu Masecha Hashem. But he was rabbi in Nikolsburg. He left to go to Frankfurt. Frankfurt, my understanding, not sure if they had a minyan of Shomer Shabbos Jews when Hirsch arrived. He transformed the city. But he gave up a big position to really, change Jewish history by moving to, and he stayed in Nikolsburg. It would be a good rabbi. He would not be as famous as he was. It's only in Frankfurt where he sort of transformed all of Yiddishkeit. So Rav Yonatan Eifshitz was also rabbi in Nikolsburg, and he was in Prague. But he's most famous, but we'll talk about him here anyway.
He was involved in a big controversy.
Yeah, he was okay, forget the controversy. Yes, he was, and we'll talk about, and Schneur Lyman, I mentioned earlier, is the world's expert on this controversy. But before we get to the controversy, which I guess is unfortunate that that's what they talk about. So yesterday we were in the Spanish shul in Prague. You have these, there are 4 shuls. Okay, the way Prague is set up, we're staying in the old city, the old Jewish quarter. They actually have a phenomenal film. Some guy in the 1800s drew the entire city of Prague it took 20 years, and they've made that into a film to see what it looked like. What happened was in the early 1900s, Prague became like a slum. It was filthy and whatever, and the city wanted to make it beautified, so they knocked down. Nothing to do with anti-Semitism. They just knocked down hundreds of houses, but it was the houses like in the Jewish quarter. And they also knocked down a number of shuls when they did it. And it's very beautiful. And they knocked it down to make it. So some of the shuls were destroyed, but some of the shuls are still standing. So there are 4 shuls in sort of the immediate area within 6 blocks of each other, whatever. So we were in the Spanish shul yesterday. That's called the Spanish shul. That's because beautiful, absolutely beautiful. The same style as the Dohani. It's this very Moorish, beautiful architecture. So on the side, they have all these, artifacts. So they have handwritten manuscripts of Rav Yonatan Eibschitz. And it's like really amazing to see. You can see the handwritten works he did. So from the year where he was the Ab Beitin, he was the head of the court in Prague. So Rav Yonatan, I believe Gretz says that Rav Yonatan Eibschitz, I think he can not, Gretz was, of course, a contemporary of Hirsch, and he wasn't, turned out he wasn't an Orthodox Jew, quote unquote, in that, the orthodoxy of 19th century Germany. But I think Gretz considered Yonatan Eibschitz to be the greatest rabbi of the 18th century, and he says he had 25,000 students, which is sort of hard to imagine what that means exactly. And he was a tremendous speaker. He was a Gadosh B'Gdolim. The 18th century was full. I mean, all centuries, but the 18th century is full of Gedolei Torah. The Vilna Gaon lived then. Just Rabbi Yeshua Fog. The list of outstanding Gedolei Torah. It was whatever. It was a time we developed great Gedolei Torah, and Rav Yonatan Eibschitz perhaps towered over them all. And he wrote the Kreti Upleti. He wrote commentaries on the Shulchan. His books today are studied today in yeshivot. Now he was accused. That's what Rav Yonatan Eibschitz is most famous for. He was accused by Rav Yaakov Emden of being a follower of Shabtai Tzvi. I wrote. I didn't know this till we were last Friday. We were in Buda, right? Buda and Pest were two different cities till they amalgamated. So we're in the old Sephardic shul in Buda. So I did not know this the last week, but Dr. Mark mentioned that the Chacham Tzvi's father, the Chacham Tzvi grew up in Buda because his father was the rabbi here in Buda. And they say he was a follower of Shabtai Tzvi. He was a Sabbatean. And this is in the 1600s. Now, the Chacham Tzvi is the most famous, or the one who really took on the Sabbateans, head on. So it's very interesting. Whether that, I don't want to give psychology here, and I know for true if his father was a Sabbatean, he went to war, and Rav Yaakov Emden continued that war. And he sniffed out, he could smell them a mile away. But as Schneur Lyman, who's the world's expert on this subject, says, there's a lot of collateral damage. He succeeded. Rabbi Yaakov then got rid of Sabbateanism, which was a much bigger movement than people realized it was. He succeeded, but he caused a lot of damage on the way. A lot of innocent people got hurt. And you have to realize that if you weren't in Cherem, if you weren't excommunicated in the 18th century, you were a nobody. Because nobody, in other words, you had to be excommunicated because whatever side you were on, everybody had to take a side. It's terrible. It was really terrible. And that's where you have Yaakov Emden couldn't daven in the same place as Rav Yonatan Eibschitz. And I'm not going to get it. Was he? Wasn't he? I'll end with the comment that was it David Berger? I heard this from. I think it was David. Yes, it was David Berger. So I was at a program we did in Toronto at a Torah Motion program, and actually it was Reuven Tradbergs, who was a rabbi in Toronto, grew up in Ottawa. He's a rabbi in Toronto for a number of years before he made Aliyah. He is now works for the RCA in Israel. Remember, at the end, you can listen to it. You find it on our Torah Motion archives. So he asked, David Berger was talking on Chabad, which is all over the place here. And, and it's unfortunately not always smooth. The relationship between the communities on Chabad are not always as nice as we might like them. I'll just leave it at that. So David Berger was, he doesn't like Chabad ideology. He thought that it's in danger of becoming Christian. I'm not going to get into that whole thing now, but Reuven Tradbergs got up and he said to David Berger, says, I don't understand what's such a big deal. Rav Yaakov Emden was accused, people thought Rav Yonatan Eibschitz was a Sabbatean. That's even worse. And, why we study his books. Like, so what? So the Rebbe, they think he's the Mashiach. Big deal. Who cares? They thought the Yonatan Eibschitz believed in Shabtai Tzvi, and we still study his books. So David Berger made an insightful comment. He says that's because the world doesn't accept that he was a Sabbatean. They believe he wasn't in the rabbinic world. And because had they believed he was a Sabbatean, you would have never heard of him. He would have been thrown out. Just like I mentioned, you would have never heard of the Abarbanel. Had the Abarbanel accepted the offer of Ferdinand and Isabella to stay in Spain, So he would have stayed, like the chief rabbi of Spain, Rabbi Avram Senior, did stay, and you never heard of him for that reason. But because many rabbis converted, many rabbis. It's not like what they teach you in the, in the whatever, that, oh, everybody left Spain and nobody converted. It's not like that. I'm not judging them. I might have done the same thing. Who knows? It's very hard to imagine. God forbid we should judge what they did, but that's the reality. Many rabbis converted. So the Abarbanel was offered to stay without converting, as far as I know. He didn't have to convert. He was so important. And he chose not to. Had he chosen to, we would have thrown out of our tradition. No one would study the Abarbanel. So the point was that the Rav Yonatan Eibschitz is being accepted into our canon because people assume, the rabbinic world assumes he wasn't a Sabbatean. Whether he was or not, that's not for me to discuss. But there's much written about that. But anyways, that's sort of. But Rabbi Yonatan Eibschitz was a giant of giants in learning, and he served as the up. He was never the chief rabbi in Prague. Okay, we don't have that much time left. Let's spend a few minutes on the Noda B'Yehuda, perhaps the most famous of the current rabbis. As I mentioned, I just saw his grave a few minutes ago, a few hours ago, and it's interesting. There's a tombstone in front of the tombstone. Okay, the Maharal is buried. The old cemetery in Prague is like right in the back. I forget what the shul is called. Yaakov, if you can remind me. The shul we went to, that's 80,000 names mentioned. It's really quite powerful. It's a beautiful little shul. They name all the people in Czechoslovakia who were killed in the war. And they have it's in alphabetical order, city by city. It's unbelievable. 80,000 names. And they put the dates, so they know they were born, of every person who was killed by the Nazis here in the shul. And it had been up there, and the communists took it down, and then students went back at the fall of communism and put it back up, and it took years, and it's really, that's what's in the shul. That's the walls of the shul are covered with the 80,000 names of the people who were killed. And then you walk out of the shul and you go up.
It's the Pinkus.
The Pinkus Shul, thank you. Right, there's the Maisel Shul, the Spanish Shul, and the Altneuschul. Right, those are the four shuls we went to see. Right, the Maisel's is the private shul, and the Pinkus Shul. Thank you very much, Yaakov. So you go up about 10 steps to the cemetery in Prague. Why do you go up 10 steps? Because the cemetery is above street level, because there are like 8 rows or layers of graves underneath. The Jewish community, they didn't give them space. They had a little tiny area. It's not such a big area. They're like, I don't know, 100,000 graves there. I don't remember the exact number. They said many graves there. But look on top, they're way less. So they're actually layered on top of each other. So the ground is much higher. So you have to go on. But the ones above ground, the Maharal is buried there. And pointed out, it's very interesting. Him and his wife have one tombstone. Like, that's considered like reform today, the husband and wife, like modern. But the Maharal it's not like 2 separate tombstones. It's one tombstone for the Maharal and his wife. And Shimshon Raphael Hirsch is buried next to his wife in Frankfurt, but it's 2 separate tombstones. There's Shimshon Raphael Hirsch's wife. Person, I don't know, in certain circles, they won't bury men and women next to each other. But anyway, so the Maharal and the buried next to, and so this cemetery where the Maharal is buried, and it's amazing it's beautiful to see actually how many non-Jews are here in Prague coming to all the shuls. Like there's a huge, the tourists, we were in Barcelona last week, the amount of tourists in Europe, I don't know if it's a post-COVID or what it is, we're overrun with tourists, and they come to, and it's very beautiful. They come to all the Jewish sites. That's part of the tourism in Prague. So that cemetery closed in the 1700s, I think 1787, if I remember correctly. The Noda B'Yehuda dies in 1793. What's the Noda B'Yehuda's real name? Anybody? The Noda B'Yehuda's real name is Rav Yecheskel Landau. So why did he call his book the Noda B'Yehuda? Because that's his father, Yehuda. Rav Yehuda, but the Noda B'Yehuda. So Rav Yecheskel Landau. So he's buried in the newer cemetery, which also isn't in use anymore. But that was used from 1787, and he died soon after. So I imagine he's one of the earlier people. There's that was used till the 1900s. Unfortunately, like is often the case here, most of the cemetery, there's a big communication tower there. It's like a big restaurant. They destroy the cemetery. They build over the cemetery. the Jewish community managed to save one part of the cemetery where all the famous rabbis and some wealthy people, whatever, and are buried. So Rav Elazar Fleckless, when he started with the Chuma Yava, is buried there. Shir of Shlomo, what Rappaport, I forget now what the Yud is. Shlomo Yitzchak, I forget. That's the so it's son-in-law. You have a whole bunch of famous rabbis buried there also. But it's funny. The Northern Yehuda has a very simple matzeva, a simple gravestone. There's buried the Yecheskel land. Period. Okay, that's it. Doesn't say anything. You go to Hirsch's grave. That talks about, or the Chatam Sofer's grave, which we were at on Wednesday also. And it talks, or Tuesday at the Chatam Sofer's grave. That's another story. It talks about it's amazing what they did. It's like on and on, and it's generally true. I mean, I know we exaggerate a little after death, but I mentioned before Hirsch's tombstone is the only time in my life I've seen. Maybe there are others I haven't seen it where the tombstone it says Nun Sadik Beit Hey Nishmatot Tzror B'Tzror Chaim. There's no taf. Tehei Nishmato. And I asked our guide, why is there no taf? What do you mean, why is there no taf? Everybody else, we pray that they should be in the bond of eternal life. We don't have to pray for Hirsch. We know for sure. In other words, everybody else, I'm not sure. So today we pray. He should be Hirsch. I don't have to pray. He's so great. He's so great that we don't even have to pray. Of course, he's in the bond of eternal life. So no. So the Noah's grave his tombstone doesn't say anything like Nechama Leibowitz. I think her tombstone has one word, Nechama. Does it have? Maybe it says Morah. I'm not sure. I have to check. Maybe Morah. She was a teacher. That's all it says. One word. She didn't allow anything on her tombstone. So the Noah Yehuda apparently gave instructions. He doesn't want any honorifics on the tombstone. That's it. He died here, no honorifics. So the community put up in front of his tombstone, a big tombstone, that talks about how great the Noda Yehuda is. Say, well, we can't write it on his tombstone because he wouldn't let us. So we're writing it here. Of course, that's defeated the whole purpose of what he wanted. But that's basically what what can I tell you? When you die, you can't control what they do to you afterwards. So whatever he asked, so they technically followed his desire, but they put up a much bigger tombstone explaining why the Nodi tombstone is not so honorific. Okay, Beseder. Okay, so who was the Nodi Yehuda? So he got his fame from being rabbi. I forget where he was before. I don't have all my books here with me, whatever. But he spent the last, 40 years of his life. He died in 1793 in Prague as the chief rabbi in Prague. And we're entering into the modern period. Prague becomes, we mentioned this on the bus convention, Prague very quickly in the late 1800s, 1900s, very quickly becomes a totally secularized, city. Remember, they're saying apparently Czech Republic has, I think, the highest level of atheist. It's the lowest level of religiosity in Europe. They're very not religious in the Czech Republic, unlike other countries. And I don't know, because of the 30 Years' War and the religious fighting going on, whatever the reasons are, whatever the reasons are, people in Czechoslovakia are very not religious, apparently. And the Jewish community was like that also, became very religious. And he was living at the beginning of this modernization, living in the 18th century, died in 1793. And he, of course, is chief rabbi. And he had many appointments. I remember when I was in Rav Schachter's shir, one of the first stories I heard about the Noda Yehuda, he mentioned that two people who didn't like him, they didn't like the Noda Yehuda. That's always, a rabbi who doesn't have opponents is no rabbi. I think comes from Yisrael Salanter. You always have to have opponents. The rabbis not taking stands on important things. So he, apparently they these are learned people. So they conjured up a question that they knew was not written anywhere. Like they made up some question that they knew the Noda Yehuda would not be able to find a source to give an answer. So they went to him and they asked the question, and he was like, thinking, he couldn't come up with anything, and whatever. I don't know, after whatever time, he said, you guys are a bunch of fakers. You made up this question. This is not a real question. And they apparently, the story that Rav Schechter told it to us, they admitted it. So he said, how did you know? He said, because whenever I paskin a shalom, whenever I answer a question, I feel the divine presence. I feel the siyata d'shmaya. And when I was looking at, I knew immediately your question's not in the Shulchan Aruch. That wasn't hard to know. But there are lots of questions not in the Shulchan Aruch. You have to figure out how to apply. That wasn't the problem. But the problem is I didn't feel any comfort. I didn't feel help from heaven, whatever that means. So it must be, and I know you guys don't like me, so it must be that you made up this question to discredit me. That's like I saw a story recently. Oh yeah, I saw Danish Berber brings a story about Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan Spector. There were people who the Rabbi Yitzchak Spector, Yeshiva University is named after. They had rabbi in Kovno, so they sent a question. The rabbi had made a mistake or something, and the people didn't like what the rabbi sent, so they sent a letter to Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan Kovno, and to show that so the rabbi's wrong. So Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan realized right away, what's going on here? Why are they sending me this question? It must be they want to discredit the rabbi. So what he did is he sent the same answer as the rabbi had given, which is the wrong answer, the new wrong answer. And then he sent a telegram to get there quicker that what I said was wrong. In other words, to let the people know, I even made the same mistake the rabbi made. In other words, he wanted to sort of defend the rabbi. Now, he knew the rabbi was wrong, but he first rated the rabbi's right. And so like these are crazy stories. Anyway, but it's a certain sensitivity. It's very quickly, I'll just quote a couple of famous tshuvot. Maybe I'll quote three famous tshuvot of the Novi Yehuda. So the Novi Yehuda is one, of course, is one famous tshuva is he's the first one to write a tshuva on autopsies. That's perhaps the one that comes up the most in medical ethics, and he prohibited autopsies because he developed this principle achol lepanenu. It's very nice. We break every Torah law to save somebody's life, but what's life? Maybe in COVID, I can't talk to people within 500 miles of me. Like, what's life saving? There has to be a limit. So you have to have some potential for really life saving. And at the time, the 1700s, autopsy, maybe in 30 years, we'll use the information. So that didn't count. So you can't do it. So that's his favorite. So it's very controversial today. Many people say that if the Novi Yehuda were alive today, it'd be very different. He didn't prohibit autopsy because it desecrates the body. You can desecrate the body to save a life. He didn't think it would save a life. But if you live in the era of modern science, maybe it would be different. Again, we don't have to get into that, but that's a famous tshuva of his. He was the first one to discuss hunting. He doesn't like hunting. Esav's hunters, Nimrod are hunters. He allowed shaving on Chol Hamoed. That's a whole different story. Why? People disagree, perhaps because of the irreligiosity of the Jews. In other words, that you're not allowed to shave on Chol Hamoed. And but apparently the Jews, that's how the Chatam Sofer explains it. But the Jews in Prague were not so religious already. They were shaving with a razor. They wouldn't shave on Chol Hamoed, don't shave on Chol Hamoed, but they also shave with the razor when they shave. That's the way life is. So the Novi apparently was of the opinion, if you shave every day, it's not a biblical prohibition. It's only a prohibition to shave with a razor if there's real hair, but it's just like a one-day growth. It doesn't count. So he preferred that the Jews would shave with a razor every day on Chol Hamoed, then wait 10 days to shave, and then violate the biblical prohibition. But because the Novi Yehuda writes, I'm allowing shaving, but I'm not giving you the reason why. Today, Rav Soloveitchik, Rav Aaron Lichtenstein allowed shaving for a different reason, because we normally shave every day. We should allow you to shave on Chol Hamoed. The rabbis were afraid if we allowed you to shave on Chol Hamoed, you might not shave Erev Yom Tov. It was a big pain to shave back then. So you're very busy Erev Yom Tov, but people didn't work Chol Hamoed. Forget it, I'll shave for the last days of Yom Tov. So the rabbis wanted to stop that. So they said, you can't shave on Chol Hamoed. That's what forced you to shave at the beginning. But today we shave every day. So that's what Soloveitchik said, now you're obligated to shave on Chol Hamoed. No. And I'll end maybe just in that, maybe I shouldn't end with this or I should end with this, but a very, very juicy question. Also, I heard this first from Rav Schechter in the Novi Yehuda. It's a very important question. There's a lot of implication. Basically, some guy was learning and she was boarding in somebody's house. And what they did, they didn't have dorm. The first person to set up dorm, who was the first? What's the first yeshiva to have a dormitory? As far as I know,
Volozhin?
no, Volozhin did not have a dormitory.
Lublin.
Rav Meir Shapiro, he was an innovator. Daf Yomi, he was the first one. The yeshiva should have a dormitory, should be nice, meals. That's Rav Meir Shapiro, Hasidic Rebbe, member of the Polish parliament. Yomi. So Rav Meir Shapiro, dormitory. So this boarder is living in a house, and the husband would go out to a shiur on Shabbos afternoon, and he would have an affair with his wife. And during she was having an affair. And after a couple of years, he sort of, he woke up or whatever. He felt terrible, felt guilty, does tshuva. And now he wants to know, does he have to tell the husband? Because the husband has to divorce his wife. Does he have an obligation to tell the husband? So that's it. And what should he do to do tshuva? So it's a nice, juicy tshuva that has a lot of application. This question comes up all the time. We were discussing this last Shabbos, a case in New York where a woman confided in a rabbi that she had an affair, and the rabbi went and told the husband, and the woman turned around and sued the rabbi. She went to discuss the rabbi in confidence, and the rabbi broke that confidence. And well, I'm not saying so. How would the extension of kavod abriut? So that actually has a very there are a lot of important halakhic aspects he discussed. Rabbi Yaakov Yellen was telling me last week, right, that the rabbi had no right to break that confidence and say the woman's having an affair, and no court would allow if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, that's a very but the Noda Yehuda wrote many Shuvot. He was really one of the leading rabbis of the 18th century, and in many ways the last great famous rabbi of the Mara. They had other rabbis here served, of course, later. But in terms
What
of,
did he say?
so the Noda Yehuda actually said that he cannot rely on kavod abriut. In other words, we have this principle that if you're passive, I can passively violate lots of commandments. If there's some reason, like I can, this comes up all the time. Let's say you work at a company and the company's doing illegal stuff. So if you report in the company, if you whistleblow, you might get fired. But I'm obligated by the Torah to whistleblow, but I'm going to lose my job. So many poskim write, if you're passive, I'm violating lo tamud al damrecha passively, so I don't have to give up my whole livelihood. The same way I don't have to spend more than 20% of my money to a positive mitzvah, I don't have to spend more than 20%. I don't have to spend more than 20% for a negative mitzvah if it's like passive. I can't violate this, eat non-kosher or Shabbos, violate Shabbos, because it's going to cost me 80% of my income. But if it's passively, so that's the head there for somebody who works at a company. Again, not all the details, whatever. Sometimes you don't have to whistleblow. So that was one of the arguments here, that he's by having the husband live with his wife in sin, so to speak, but he's passive. He's not really doing anything. So nobody claims that's not passive, because the fact that they're living together is active, and he has an obligation to stay. The question is, does the husband have to believe him? There are no two witnesses. That's a separate question. Today, I think poskim say you don't say, and the husband shouldn't believe. But he felt that he did have to say, I believe. Others disagreed, and then he gave him a whole tshuva process. He said, "I'm not from the tshuvat hamishkal." That was in Hasidei Ashkenaz in the Middle Ages, early Middle Ages. If you sinned a sin of passion, you go sleep in the snow for a week, to cool your passion. They had these all like atonements, penances to sort of atone for the type of sin. I don't know from these things. I'm not. He was very against Kabbalah, the Noda Yehuda. He was anti-Kabbalistic and anti-Hasidic. So but he said, I think he told me he has to fast for 3 years every Monday and Thursday. He gave him a whole series of things he should do. But anyways, that's it. Okay, it's I see I'm a little bit over time, so I'll stop. I'll take the question. But just quickly to review, the Altneuschul is really the most. It's a pretty simple shul, as some of these medieval shuls went in terms of beauty and architecture. But there's no more powerful shul in the world than the Altneuschul. And the Gedolei Israel were here, from the Maharal to the Noda Yehuda, the Bush, Kliyakar, really great rabbis who served in Prague, which was a very important city for much of Jewish history. And there's a lot more to say about all these people. I just want to scratch the surface, give you a feeling. So when you walk into the shul, like tonight, please God, there's certain, you think about these people, it makes the davening so much more powerful. This is, after all, normally a class on the Siddur.
Hey, may I say something? Do you hear me?
Absolutely. Yes, Eve, sure. Then, yeah.
My grandmother was from Prague, grew up in Prague, and she was a member of a very old Jewish family in Prague, the Yaitelis family, whose graves we found at the cemetery outside the city. But she went to shul. That was her regular shul. And when we
Okay.
went there, in fact, we sat where she used to sit. My mother had told me, looking through the tiny windows at the men's shul. And her uncle was the head of the Chevra Kadisha in Prague until he was deported to Theresienstadt, and thank God survived, although two of her sisters did not. But I wanted to say, when you said that the community became not religious, mostly, it was a very mixed sort of thing. My grandmother and all of her three sisters went to university in Prague right after the First World War, to university. Two were doctors, one was a lawyer, but they were still a very religious family.
Right. They were a minority. I mean, there were, what can I say? That's what I understand, that Prague became a very, big cities. Always the big cities had less religion. Budapest the same way. I mean, there's much less. The rural areas maintained their religiosity. They didn't have to struggle with modernity, all kinds of reasons, but that is common. Yeah, of course, there are always religious issues. I mean, today there are very few. I mean, there are very few locals. We're going to meet with the Rebbitzin of the community tomorrow. She's going to speak to us. But there is Chabad all over the place in Europe, but they're not native. Like they're not, they're here working to either with tourists or to native. But to have local people, you don't have so many. You can count them. I mean, in Vienna, we were in Vienna earlier the week. That's much more. But okay, yeah. But okay, let me just quickly take the questions. We were in Prague, surrounded by modern day shoppings. Okay, they're shopping everywhere. Yeah, there's some nice shopping here. Yeah. Isn't there interpretation name being Altneuschul? Yes. That's probably a much later one. Altneuschul on condition. You build a shul. It's not a real shul because the real shuls are only in Israel. That's what allows us to eat in shuls. And there are all these halachas how you have to treat a shul. And so some of you say, well, they don't apply in shuls outside of Israel because they're not real shuls. They're just fake shuls. Till we get to Israel, they're built on condition. I don't want to sanctify that shul, but I don't think that's really, I mean, that's later on they threw that in, but I don't know. The invention of the Marala, Prague, and London. Okay, that's the Lyman article. Very good. Yaakov Yellen posted the Schneer Lyman article, I assume, on the Golem. Okay, yes.
Is there any direct connection between the Altneuschul and Herzl's book of Neuland?
And what is there any connection between the Altneuschul and what shul?
The Herzl's book.
Herzl's book, Altneuschul.
Oh, no, I don't think so. I not that I know of. Herzl was born in Budapest, of course. I wrote about that this week, right? Herzl was born next door to the Dohani Shul. Mamash Dohani Shul is like the most beautiful shul there is. I mean, if you like that style, maybe some people, but it's really amazing shul. I don't think there. I mean, I imagine old new like there. I imagine there's some connection, but my guess is that Herzl never heard of the Maharal. That's or never heard of the Altneuschul. Herzl was a totally secularized Jew who
That
right.
the very short biography, but I think Hawkins would sort of he was more Jewish than people think.
Later on in life, later on he came to Zionism, but I really don't know. I don't know enough about Herzl to know what he knew about rabbinic Judaism. He became more interested, but he was still never what classical religious Jew at all. But okay, I see Bela's writing, but thank you. I assume the Maharal's birthday Jews from blood levy, that there's some story about that. Okay, his great scholar. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, could be. I inspired his great grandson. I don't know who his great grandson of the Maharal's great grandson is. I don't know. I'm sure he must have had thousands of them. He defended the truth. Yes, that's what I said. That's the fourth one. Is the only one I really talked about. He took Agada much more, I'm not necessarily literally, but much more seriously and authoritatively than many other scholars did. Okay, one can rationally believe in visible, sometimes physical manifestation like the golem of many ancient entities. But by the way, Rav Yaakov Emden has a tshuva, Rav Yaakov Emden, in his response, can you count the golem towards a minion?
Yeah.
And the answer is no. As he says, first you have to be a human being, then you have to be Jewish, but the golem doesn't count. That's what so when we have robots who come to shul, they don't count. Okay, he saw exile as unnatural. Yeah, okay, yes. I thought it was Shalom Shachnik. That's correct. What did I say? Yaakov Pollock and Shalom Shachnik, the two sort of founders of Polish Jewry.
You said Shlomo. You said
Right.
Shlomo Shachner.
Oh, instead of Shalom. Thank you. So I think, I don't remember exactly, but if you say it's Shalom, then correct. The Rama married his daughter, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, something about philosophy. I don't remember what I was talking about them. Okay, the Betamax by Sony. Oh, there you go. Okay, no, that doesn't exist. The closest thing to an update in the Mishnah Berurah is the new Dirshu edition, which is exactly that. Okay, I've never actually looked at it, even though I think it comes from Toronto. Dirshu, I think that's who's funds it all, but I've actually never seen it. I mean, I think I've seen the cover. I've never opened it up. It updates the Mishnah Berurah, but that's not the only one. But okay. But why do I think that the Rambam became so omnipresent and authoritative? Okay, we're going to have to leave that for another time. Why did the Rambam? The Rambam isn't so authoritative in halacha. The Shulchan Aruch is much more authoritative. We don't. The Shulchan Aruch is partially based on the Rambam, but when you say the Rambam is studied more, but as theoretical understanding and practical law, the Shulchan Aruch is more authoritative, except for the Jews in Yemen. I think took the Rambam much more seriously. The Maharal inspired his great grandson, the seventh generation. Oh yeah, they have a thing in Chabad. Yeah, I don't know that they connected. They didn't say his son. Okay, but you know what? When you go down 7 generations, everybody's your great grandfather, right? Eventually, everybody's going to be descended from the Maharal, because all it takes, you marry your 14th cousin, who you don't even know. So who is, the 14th cousin? Everybody's related to everybody. Go down your 28th cousin. Of course, so everybody, we're all related from Avraham Avinu. All of us are descended from Avraham Avinu. So I'm not impressed when somebody's like, 12 generation. I'm sorry, pardon my my cynicism. I don't mean it in a negative way, but like that's that 8 generations later. It's hard to say he was inspired. You can say the writings of the Maharal, but that's not because he was my great grandfather. That's because I loved his writings. I loved his teachings. So you can say the teachings of somebody inspired somebody 20 years later. You cannot say that the fact that he was my ancestor. I don't know. I don't think so, but maybe I don't know. You can tell me if you disagree. Okay, but yes, Chavi Jacobs is descendant from the Heller family. That's correct. Rav Yotam lived Heller. He had a lot of descendants. That's correct. Yaris Tavash, yes, also written. I see. Thank you for all your very good comments. Bailey, right, about the Rav Yotam Eibschitz. Yes, Yaris Tavash wrote that. J.J. Shechter has done work. Yes. A little bit, J.J. Shechter did his PhD on Rav Yaakov Emden, and Mark Shapiro mentioned this week that he's finally going to, it's never been published in English, his PhD. I imagine there's a law, I don't know, but I'm guessing there's a lot of controversial stuff, and he didn't want to publish it, but now that he's in his 70s, I'm making this up, 70s, and, he doesn't have to care. I don't know, but it has not been published, but J.J. Shechter did his PhD under Dr. Twersky at Harvard on Rav Yaakov Emden. Yes, Rav Emden was a fascinating figure and quite academic scholars suggest strongly that Auschwitz was a Sabbatean. Yes, I know that. I didn't want to say that, but since you said it, correct. I said in the rabbinic world, they assume he was not a Sabbatean, but in the non-rabbinic world, they do assume that Rav Auschwitz was a Sabbatean. We do know for a fact, and this is accepted even in the rabbinic world, his son was a Sabbatean, but that doesn't necessarily prove. Pinchas Lublin, thank you. Where can you find the affair? That's you want to know the last Tshuva I quoted? It's Chelek Beit Tshuva Lamed Hey, I believe. You want to look it up? Maybe in Sefaria, second Orach Chaim, Chelek Beit's number 35, I believe. Okay, Steve, and then I really do have to go. I have to get ready for Shabbos. But Steve, yes, what's your question?
A quick comment about the note of Yehuda. I was told that he says that when you visit Israel, you only keep 1 day Yom Tov. Maybe that's something.
That's the Chacham Tzvi. I wrote that in. I don't know if you're reading, the reflections I'm sending from here that I write. So I don't think I don't know that the Noda Yehuda said that. I do know the Chacham Tzvi. He's the one who's famously said that if you're visiting Israel, it doesn't matter where you live, it matters where you are. 2,000 years ago, if you had been in Israel. So anybody in Israel keeps one day. And of course, it means Israelis who are visiting here keep 2 days. That's the backstory. Everybody likes to go to Israel, keep one day, but you have to realize if you make Aliyah and then you visit your parents back here, you have to keep 2 days of Yom Tov. You can't have it both ways. If you want to follow the minhag, even when you're keeping one day, you can't do any public malacha. Anyways, I do have to go. Please God, next week we'll be back to our regular time, 9:15 in the morning, back to the Siddur on Slach Lenu. Although I like these sort of change of shiurim paces. I don't know if you like them, but whatever, it's sort of a little bit different. So
It's wonderful.
Thank you very much, and have
Thank
Shabbat
Shalom. Enjoy.
I hear
Shabbat
lots
shalom.
of what's going on in Israel. I'm not up on the news as much, but
Shabbat shalom, Sam.
I'm sorry.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Let's hear good news, everybody. We will. Shabbat shalom. Please God, we'll see you soon for good occasions. Okay, thank you. Shabbat
Tודה
shalom.
רבה, Shabbat shalom.